That was just a quick introduction of myself. I will share my email address. I work in a normal time, normal basis. I work over in Denny Hall, but right now we're doing everything virtually. So in our office, we have 4 different career coaches, and we all work with different types of communities. When we talk about communities in our office, really communities are broken down into industries. Um, but if you set up a career coaching appointment with one of us, we would be able to give you some help for whatever type of industry or field that you're actually looking into. And so I'll turn it over to Crystal.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. So I am very excited to be here today. I would look forward to learning more about emotional intelligence here together. We're going to talk about what emotional intelligence is, learn about the 4 different quadrants and how you can apply that to your job search, interview, and even starting your career. So before I get started, I just wanted to briefly introduce myself here and make sure, can you see the slide okay? Okay, perfect. So as Mark said, I am from FAES, and so that stands for the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. So that, if you're familiar with the 4-H Center, that is right across the street from the Schottenstein Center. And so I work there for the Ohio 4-H Foundation. And so if you're familiar with 4-H, 4-Hers raise, it's a youth development program. And so I work to raise the funds for those programs. I got my master's degree right there in the same college in extension education and specialized in leadership. And then my thesis was actually on emotional intelligence. So I spent a lot of time studying this topic. So I'm looking forward to learning about it with you again today. And my email address there is at the bottom in case you have questions. So let's get started. What is emotional intelligence? So I'm going to guess many of you have heard the phrase before. I think it's something that gets kicked around a lot. So I'm going to take it a little step further today. I use a lot of the definitions, official ones, from Daniel Goleman. And so he's someone that has written many books on this topic. So this is his definition. It refers to the capacity to recognize and manage your own feelings and then be able to recognize and respond effectively to those feelings of others. And so I think that's one of the pieces that we forget a lot of the time, that how it's not just about us, it's about how we're responding to other people. And I think it's something else to pay attention to, that throughout your life, most people feel that IQ is pretty set. You know, you're set with a certain amount of IQ. Well, your emotional intelligence is something that you can use to make the most of that IQ. So your EQ is what you use to make the most of your IQ. And so you also, the other thing I wanted to mention is you may hear emotional intelligence also referred to EI. It's the same thing. So EI or EQ, people call it different things. I think originally the Y EQ was put together just so it sounded more similar to the IQ. But obviously when you look at the abbreviation, EI would make a little bit more sense as well. So clear that up. Okay, so this is another way that I think is really great. So these come from this book I mentioned here at the top. We're going to spend a lot of time using her work. The Smart New Way to Get Hired. She talks about a lot about things with emotional intelligence. And this, I think, helps you kind of put it into context. So you think about, okay, so we hear that phrase, what it means, but what specifics? So if you look at here at this list, so thinking about like really hardcore, being aware of your emotions. Do you really go throughout the day and think about how you're feeling about every little interaction? How about your self-confidence? Or do you evaluate midday? How am I handling my stress today? I can think of many days where that might be a good idea. It can have to do with staying motivated and trusting other people or cooperating with others, being socially responsible, adapting to change. I think right now we're all had to do that just unbelievably and very quickly. And so how are we handling that adaptation? showing empathy to others, communication, managing conflict, and then having influence and being persuasive. So those are some more tangible ways when you think about it, what these skills are that you can specifically develop that would fall under the overarching. Certainly not exclusive, but these are just some ideas to help you kind of put some context there. Okay, so how do you know what your EQ is? So I'm sure you're aware for IQ, you could have it assessed. And so that's actually the case for EQ as well. I think that's something that people don't realize, that your emotional intelligence is something that you can measure, and research has shown that you can improve your emotional intelligence. So as we said before, your IQ you're more set with, but your emotional intelligence, you have the ability to improve. So there are lots of ways you can do that. There's many assessments out there. The EQI is one of the more common ones known in research and in very trusted results. But those do come with a fee, and so we're not always able to do that. Although through our college in the Leadership Center, they do run a program where if you're interested in that, you can contact them and take an assessment. But this resource in this book is just a quick few pager that's free. So if you ever want to check out this book, you could do that, and I listed the page numbers there for you. But it really just gives you a basics of knowing where to start. So here are some areas, and they'll give you a score, and you can see, I don't score as well in this particular area. Maybe I should work on that. So just know that that's an opportunity for you. Okay, so I wanted to give you some more of the research side of things, breaking down emotional intelligence a little bit more. So as I mentioned before, Daniel Goleman has done a lot of work in this field. And so his quadrant here, I feel like, does a great job of really breaking it down so we can kind of understand all the different components. So you see there's the 4 boxes, but then we have the recognition and awareness on the top and the regulation and control on the bottom. Then we have the self and the others. So combined are these 4 different areas. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And so we're going to kind of go in that order because that's kind of important. We need to start with ourself and then learn the awareness piece and then management piece. Then we move on to the whole grouping of how we deal with others. And again, we start out with that awareness piece and then the management piece. So it's difficult to jump into managing your relationships if you have not worked on yourself first. So that helps you break it down a little bit. I would also suggest, if you're interested at all in this topic, just reading one of Daniel Goleman's books. He spends a lot of time going into the neuroscience behind all of this. We are not going to have time to do all that today. But I think that's something that if you're interested in that, it's really helpful to understand that this is the real deal. It's not just about your feelings, like you're wired that way, and that's important information. So I'm gonna make sure and put in a plug for that as well. So we're gonna work through this quadrant here this afternoon. And so starting with self-awareness, and then we'll move through each piece here. So this is another, John Mayer is another emotional intelligence research psychologist. He's worked lots of work done by him. And so self-awareness is being aware of both our mood and our thoughts about mood. Okay, so again, very similar to some of the things that we've talked about with Goleman there. Goleman says it's the ability to read and understand your emotions as well as recognize their impact on others. And then just breaking that down so simply, you can just say self-awareness is a basic understanding of how we feel and why you're feeling that way. So just very basic thinking about that. So we're going to take a look at an example of how that might work. So part of my research, I read the book here mentioned the emotionally intelligent team. So some of my work actually surrounded how people work with others. So this is kind of a breakdown, though, from their book of how they suggested. So you can think about an example in your mind, maybe something where you had an emotional response, and then just kind of think about how you would walk through that in this example. So you see the emotional feeling, and then you're acknowledging you're having that feeling. You identify more facts in the situation. You accept the feeling. Then you reflect on why that emotion is showing up in that current moment. And then notice how others are feeling present before you found out that information. Think about the purpose. So what's someone trying to show that to you? Then you act. So I want to emphasize that's step 6 in this process. And then lastly, you'd want to reflect on that. So you can see this happens to us all day long, all of our various emotions. And so there's actually a cycle that we're going through there. So I put down here at the bottom, so that it's the exact same information, those steps, but then I wanted you to be able to see these feelings. So you could assess this. Let's say you're going into the job search. Maybe you're getting close to graduating and you're thinking about getting a new job. So you might take some time and think about, what am I feeling right now? What are your feelings telling you about the job search? So you might review the sequence here. Take some time, label your feelings. Notice, like, do you have any physical reactions to those feelings? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling really nervous? Are you feeling anxious or scared? Link some of those feelings and the behaviors to that. And so that you can understand better what you're working towards and how you're feeling about that situation. And then I just listed some examples of some of the feelings down there, but it's endless there for sure. Okay, so we're going back to the chart here. So you see under self-awareness there, we spent just a minute talking about emotional self-awareness and accurate self-assessment. We didn't even touch on self-confidence. So I just wanted to mention that disclaimer to you. I've kind of picked out an item or two under each one for us to talk about. Otherwise, we'd be here for a week. But just know that each of these areas, there's just lots of different things that you could work on. And you may already know this about yourself, like, oh, I'm really strong in this, but not so much in that, you can fine tune what you work on too. So I'm going to make sure and mention that. So we've covered self-awareness very briefly, and now we're going to move down to self-management. So that's the box below. So you see there, you have that emotional self-control, transparency, adaptability, achievement, initiative, and optimism. So lots and lots of areas there that you could study more. Okay, so this is the one where I really enjoyed a lot, because Daniel Goleman goes into the workings of the brain, so to speak, here. So self-management or self-regulation can be defined as the ability to manage one's actions, thoughts, and feelings in flexible ways to get desired results. Okay, so you're managing your feelings to get the desired results. So my favorite piece that he mentions here, he talks about the amygdala. So if you see that there, the amygdala is that green little spot there in the center of the brain here. And that one is the one that's responsible, what he calls for a hijack. It's the center of the emotions for the emotional behavior of your brain. Okay, so this is the area of the brain that goes into overdrive, causing high activity, causing us to focus or obsess and stress over certain things that are causing us problems. And because of that, it makes it very difficult to think about anything else. So I'm sure there's times when you've been in a stressful situation and you're just so focused on that, you lose your sense of other things going on. And so that is part of a survival instinct in your brain. So it's not necessarily your fault. So it's to be able to understand that. So that's where that self-awareness piece we just covered is super important. So you have to realize we are in that state. Now you're trying to manage that state. So the goal is to be able to recognize you're in the hijack and sort of try to figure out and bring some mental clarity back to whatever you are supposed to be doing, and focusing on the job at hand. So for example, if you are totally stressed out about a job interview, and if you are so focused out and stressed on that aspect of it, you're not going to be able to be your best self during the interview. So just being able to be aware of your feelings before you go into these situations, then you can help prepare for going into there. All right. Mouse got stuck there. Sorry about that. All right. So then just a brief exercise in the self-management part here. So your emotional self-control is your ability to manage emotions in a positive and effective way. So I'm sure we could all, give millions of examples of times that we did not control our emotions in ways that, we thought were productive. So as we talked about in the job search, you probably will have some strong emotions throughout the process. So thinking through some management strategies for how you're going to handle those, figuring out how you're feeling, what negative thoughts are contributing to that feeling, and what self-talk strategies you can use to challenge those negative thoughts. So if you go into a job interview and you have negative thoughts of, oh, I'm never going to get this job and I'm not qualified, what strategies can you use prior to going into there to change that? So maybe you just change your talk to that, or you don't get the job and it hurts to be rejected, but you could change it. It's not a self-reflection on you as a person, that you have many great assets to offer to the right position. This one just wasn't the right one for you. So it's just very important to be aware of the things that we're telling ourselves, and then to be able to manage those thoughts throughout the process. So I encourage you to take a few minutes and just think about that as you're entering the job search. If there's things that are sensitive topics for you, and maybe some strategies that could help you prepare for those things before you get put in those situations. All right, so we're going back to our chart here. So we've went through self-awareness and self-management. And again, we only covered really emotional self-control there. There's lots of other areas where you could do more exercises on to improve on. So I want to go to social awareness next. So the three main topics that Goleman puts in there: empathy, organizational awareness, and service. So we are going to move into that. Okay. So his definition of social awareness is the ability to accurately notice emotions of others and read, so to speak, situations appropriately. So it's kind of sensing what the person you're talking to is feeling, and gaining that empathy, and then being prepared to respond. So it's kind of a feedback loop. So you kind of see in that picture there, you think about when you're talking to someone else, you should be looking at them and trying to figure out, what's going on in their world too, and so that you can communicate appropriately there. So example of this, it's something that in one of Goleman's articles, I thought this one was a good one. So he says, she's getting angry by that last remark. And so you think about that. How many times have you been talking to someone and you see them respond back and you're like, I said something that didn't go over quite right. And you're realizing that. And then you say, or maybe I'm boring them. Like they stop paying close attention. And then you say something else. Oh, that's better. It looks like they like that. And so you see, we make those judgments all day long when we're talking to somebody, and we need to just make sure we're paying attention, because a lot of the cues we get from people is the nonverbals and even the verbal with the tone. And so being able to pay attention to that and have empathy for how that person is responding really will help you to be much more successful in an interview and times when you're working with, even when you start into your career and getting to know your new colleagues. This is super important to pay attention to. So that is the information you want to use when you're learning what you should say next. So this is kind of an example. I picked empathy for this section here to do the exercise for. So again, in that Smart New Way to Get Hired book, she has this great chart. I thought you think about some common body signals that we might have, and then possible emotions they might convey to someone else, right? So if you're smiling at someone, they might feel like you're confident, optimistic. When you're going in and you give them a firm handshake in that interview, they think, oh, this is great. This person's confident, energetic. But if you go in and kind of avoid eye contact, already you're sending possible signals to this person that you might not be confident, you might be dishonest or nervous or insecure. So you can see there on the chart that our body language and some of the ways that we present ourselves just portrays different emotions to the person that we're talking to in an important way. So it's very important to have awareness of that and how you're perceived by others. So you might want to do a mock interview and practice that so you can see those skills and realize like, oh, someone can point out some things to you that you didn't know that they were perceiving from you, but you're giving off that information based on some of your body language. So I think those are important things to think about when you're trying to go out into the job search. There's some examples there of many ways to practice empathy. I think we have lots of opportunity all the time to do that, but reading body language, listening to others, showing gratitude is an easy way to practice empathy. And then expressing what you have to say without judgment is another great opportunity. I think we have lots of, at least in my life, lots of opportunities to practice that one for sure. So an example when you walk into an interview, so it could be the person that you are there and you're waiting and waiting and they're late and they say, I'm sorry, I'm late. We are shorthanded. So there's so many things you could respond to in that capacity. But if you're there for a job interview, to show empathy to that person, you might say, it sounds like you're very busy. I hope I have the opportunity to take some of those tasks off your hands. So that person can see you're showing that empathy right off the bat. You're excited, you're there to help them, versus you could just say, oh, no problem, or something that just does not provide that same connection with that person. So how you present yourself is just super important, definitely in the interview, but even throughout your career. That will be some of those really small things that can make or break how you're communicating with others. All right, so we're going back to our quadrant. So this is our last quadrant section here, relationship management. So you see here, this is a really huge category that involves lots of things that you're going to have. And I think these things especially maybe won't happen so much just in an interview, but as you start into your career, these will be the important things that when you're building right off the bat. So you see that teamwork and collaboration, conflict management, developing others, influence, all those things will be super important as you start to get into your job. So relationship management, I have in parentheses there social skills, because that's what it means to us. It's you've taken the individual and now you're in a group and how you're interacting with others. So the ability to take one's own emotions and the emotions of others and the context of what's going on around you, and then be able to do that successfully. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the final quadrant. It really requires pulling the other three together. So if we have the other three figured out, this particular quadrant will flow so much better. If you have not worked on the other areas and you feel like you're strongly lacking in some of them, this part can be a lot harder. So that's where I wanted to mention again the book that I mentioned before. She's got some great exercises in here on some of the different areas to think about. So if you think about relationship management, I don't know that you probably would think about, am I an independent worker? Or how assertive am I on the job? And so I think the exercise she has in here on cooperation and collaboration, I think is just real basic. You rate yourself 1 to 10, but it can really help you see. She has a way of breaking it down of how you might end up in some of these areas. So how adaptable are you when you're put into a new situation? Are you empathetic to your colleagues? How independent of a worker are you? So some jobs you need to be very independent and be able to take instruction from a manager and just go and do what you need to do. Others, you have to be really collaborative. And so you need to be ready to work with a whole team of people. So this is your opportunity to kind of learn about those areas. In a job interview, you want to show that you are very cooperative and very collaborative. So any way that you can share that with a future employer, most fields you need those skills to be able to work on a team. I have my own responsibilities, but there's not a day goes by that I don't need to work with other people and other colleagues. And so I would definitely encourage you to work on that aspect and be thinking of examples of, how do I cooperate with others and how could I be more collaborative in some of the things that I share. So I think that is all of my slides. I'm definitely open to questions, or if Mark, you want to do some other information, we could do that at the end.
Yeah, I have a couple of things I wanted to share just about career success. I mean, um, some of the things that I wanted to go over, but it was really interesting seeing the relationship building and how you use what you're teaching from emotional intelligence and how you're going to use that into a interview setting. Um, Talking about your like a student's management style. If they're adaptable, if they're independent, if they're collaborative, and really keying in on that because the employer wants to hear that. Um, I'm sure you're aware, and most of the students have probably seen this, but the strengths finders that are out there,
Hmm. Hmm.
those can help paint a picture when you're in an interview and an interviewer asks, what are your biggest strengths? Being the party starter is not what they want to hear. They want to hear, they want to hear those really concrete things that they're looking for out of their employees. Are you good with communication? Are you good with analytical skills? Those are kind of two different ends of the spectrum, but there's a lot of other pieces to fill in the middle. So knowing what your strengths are, knowing the things that you're good at, are really important to find out before you step foot into the interview so that you're as prepared as possible. So, learning how emotional intelligence also connects to those two, that's pretty fascinating stuff. And sorry, those slides keep on jumping. They're on a timer. I forgot to take the timer off when I sent those to you, so they keep on moving on you. So, sorry about that. Um, but do any of the students who were here today, do you all have any questions about emotional intelligence before I kind of just jump into some really, really quick career success stuff? And if you don't want to shout it out, you can put it in the chat. I will do my best to take a look there and see if you guys have anything that you wanted to ask. But okay. Um, All right. So nothing in the chat. Everybody's good. Okay. So I don't have too much about career success. I don't want to hold you up too much longer, but I did want to kind of give our office a little plug. So if you're not familiar with career success at OSU and in our office in the College of Arts and Sciences, so a lot of schools or colleges, they have their own career services or career success office, and we are the Career Success Office is just for arts and sciences students. And so we're here to help you out with, in addition to resumes and cover letters, we bring programming like, partnering with somebody like Crystal to kind of bring you some different types of information that you may not be aware of or things that you may think about in your job search process. So just want you all to be aware of how you can connect with us. I just sent a link in the chat. This is to our website, to our webpage. It's under the Arts and Sciences page, but sometimes it gets a little tricky to navigate and get to where we're at. But I think that's a great place to get started, to find some information out about us, some of the events that we're doing. That's easy enough to navigate to find the events page. This next link I just wanted to share is just a really quick guides and tip sheet. When you are, thinking about the job or interview process, in the guides and tip sheet, we have what a professional resume starts to look like. If you have a resume and you started working on it already, that's awesome. If you haven't started on it, I'm giving you a template to work off of today. If you go to the guides and tip sheet, the first under the first heading of resumes, that's a drop down. If you open that up, there is a build your own career success resume template there. So you can start building off of that and making that your own here as soon as we get off this call. But if you do have a copy or a version of your own, compare it to the template that I'm sending you and see, what things you might need to tweak on yours, what sort of formatting you should maybe think about looking into changing, but definitely start to develop some ideas from what I'm sending over to you all. And then also in that guides and tip sheet, there's some information on, how to set up a cover letter. That's another component that you're going to be working on within the application process. So making sure that you have a good cover letter as well. And then the last link that I'll send over to you is a link on our career communities. So in our office, we're really broken up by the career coaches into different career communities. And what we mean by communities is basically an industry focus to it. So I typically focus on marketing, advertising, and PR, and then journalism, sports, entertainment, production. Those are my communities, but there are 5 different coaches in our office, or 4 different coaches. We're going to hire a 5th here pretty soon. But everybody has 2 different communities that they focus on. And when you become a part of the community, you are getting some information that is relevant to that industry and profession from the coaches who are, focusing on that community. But we're sending over newsletters, we're sending out jobs, we're sending out internships. We're doing things that are pretty much relevant to our industry specifically. And so if you are not on Handshake, you would sign up to be a part of a community from your Handshake profile. But this is just kind of a little bit of a very quick version of how to get established with a community and where to look about, what each community entails. So that's what I wanted to share. And up on the slide right now, we have some things about a quick chat. Quick chat is like a IM way just to connect with our office. And so say you have a question about a resume, or you want to ask about how to get a cover letter started, and you don't really want to sit down and go through maybe a coaching appointment, or you don't have the time to do a coaching appointment. If you just send us a quick IM on the quick chat, we can get you some answers here pretty fast. So just so you know, that's something an easy way to connect with us. And we're on every different type of social media platform under the sun, whether it's Twitter, Instagram. We have a YouTube station. We're on Facebook. So if you just look up ASC Career Success, you'll be able to find us in one way, shape, or form. So I won't spend too much time going over everything there. I dropped my email in the chat. So if you do want to connect with me, if you have some other questions about maybe how our office is structured or who you would reach out to, I'd be more than happy to give you a little bit of direction and guidance. But if you have just a basic question and you don't want to send it to me for whatever reason, asccareer@osu.edu is like our general email box, and somebody is active on that every day. And so if there is something in there, we're able to get in there and disperse it to the correct person. In that normal setting, we'd be over in Denny, but everybody's doing everything virtually right now. So coaching appointments are all virtual or just over the phone, whatever the student prefers. But yeah, so that's kind of all of the services, or just kind of the fast idea of the services we provide. So does anybody have any questions about anything that I touched on real quick? All right. And I saw everybody, in case anybody came in late, if you could just drop your name, number into the chat box, that would be awesome. Looks like everybody did, but just in case anybody came in late, I didn't really notice anybody stepping in late. But if there are no questions, I am good. Crystal, did you have any kind of parting shots you wanted to give the students? I know you had the references up, if you want to maybe tell them about that.
Yeah, the references are here on the screen. As I mentioned, the main 2 things I talked about were Daniel Goleman. So his original book came out in 1995. He updated it in 1998. So I would recommend that one. And then if you want to take any of those assessments, the Smart New Way to Get Hired were the examples that I gave out. I'm sure there's others out there, but I felt like hers was nice because it was geared more towards the job search and thinking about it from that perspective. So I wish you the best of luck in those efforts. You do great.
All right. Well, thanks again, Crystal. I appreciate you talking to our students. Thanks for the time again. I know we kind of got on this a little bit late, but I appreciate all the help and all the effort, and everybody who stopped in. Okay. All right. Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate that. But yeah, everybody else who popped in, thanks for coming in and hanging out with us for a little bit today. If you have any questions, you have some info to get a hold of us, and we'll reach back out. But if not, thanks. Everybody have a good day.